Thank you very much, Elvis and Simon and everyone who's organised this conference. Rob. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. We're going to quickly just give a little bit of our own story and also talk a little bit about the New Zealand situation. And as Elvis pointed out, I have been through a conversion experience in my own life more than once. I was pleased to hear that John Henry Newman also did. We're going to start just with a psalm, one that we've found comforting. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Delight, and He will give you the desires of your heart. So we're going to just let you know about our family context, and that's our family in a more compact form than we normally find them. And this is where we come from. That's the main street of Nelson. And just for those of you who don't know where New Zealand is, it's down under and beside Australia, which you'll see in the top map there. And we've got some really beautiful scenery, as many of you will know. And we also have a land that's blessed with Christianity. The early missionaries came from Catholic, Protestant, and also Protestant sources. Bishop Montpellier from France inspired some early missionaries who made a very big impact in our land, and Mother Robert, Suzanne Aubert has been considered for sainthood at the moment, and Father Garin, who had a very strong influence, particularly in our part of the country. So the New Zealand context is quite different from the Indian context. We have only 4.4 million people. We have a multicultural society, 68% European, but also a mixture of the local indigenous people, the Maori, and Asian Pacific Islanders. There are still 55% who call themselves Christian on the census, but nominally Christian. 34% say they don't have any religion. And we're blessed with a prosperous land in many respects, but culturally and spiritually, an arid land. Like many Western societies, we have high rates of these things: drug and alcohol use, sexually transmitted disease, teen pregnancies, abortion. We have a decrease in marriage, and homosexual marriage is made legal. Multiple sexual partners are quite common, not the norm. The problem with pornography and prostitution is also legalised, and we have rising rates of subfertility and infertility. Family planning, our local family planning association is affiliated to International Planned Parenthood, so it has all the same sorts of effects on society as that organisation has had in other parts of the world. So when I arrived as a young GP in practice, although I had a very good background, as brought up a Catholic, I'm number 12 of a family of 14.
Which is very unusual in New Zealand. I should have introduced Kushla properly. Sorry, I'll go back and say I'm a GP, and Kushla's the nurse in the practice. I beg your pardon. When I started practicing in general practice, I found it really difficult to know how to deal with a woman who asked for an abortion. When they came to see me, I was used to being very good at putting the patient's needs first and not letting my religious convictions interfere with my practice and all the things that I'd been taught well at medical school. But it meant I was really quite ill-equipped because I didn't have a coherent response to a woman who came to me asking for an abortion. And in general practice, you have 15 minutes for a patient, so you'd often be running late, and by the time I got to see somebody that made up their mind, they'd often be there with an advocate, and I felt I had very little I could do. I would often say to somebody, well, this is a very big decision, maybe you should go away, think about this, talk to your family, your parents, come back and we're talking about it again next week. But invariably when they came back, they still would like to have an abortion. And then I'd find myself in the position of writing letters of referral to the gynecology department, couched in terms which I felt let me off the hook, saying, that this woman is asking for an abortion, I'm not sure about the indications, can somebody please talk to them about what options they have available to them? And invariably, when I saw them next, they had had an abortion. And when that happened, I wouldn't sleep. And I struggled with my conscience. And I got to a position where I thought, no, I have to leave general practice and go and do hospital medicine, and actually made some phone calls to arrange jobs. But we prayed, and Kushla was a very big support, and at that time we had 2 or 3 children of our own, and Kushla said, look, you know, this difficulty you're having, maybe I can help. And I said to her at the time, well, you know, thank you very much, but it's just a little bit big for us to manage it. You know. But actually, there were 2 or 3 people that were quite inspiring to me, and the long and short of it was I was convicted. Actually, I knew what God wanted me to do, and instead of praying as I had done until that point, please help me to know how to deal with this problem, I prayed, Lord, I know what you want me to do, please help me to do it. Because I've got no idea how to practice as a GP and not prescribe, not refer for abortion. So for the next several months, nobody came to me for an abortion. I hadn't announced anything, it's just the way the Lord looked after me. And during that time, Patricia and I did some brainstorming and some praying, and decided that the way forward was actually to start again, and start a general practice in a Christian context, move out of the clinic that I was in, and in that context, then set up a new service. So 2001...
Practical things we had to do were role plays, so Joseph would become comfortable in how to say no when a woman asked for a termination of pregnancy with compassion and with comfort in himself, so that his own anxiety wasn't interfering with being present for the woman as he needed to be.
So that was quite helpful, because he pretended to be a woman asking for an abortion, and I'd try every way I could possibly think of saying, no, I'm not going to do that, but in a compassionate way, and explain what I would do. And we decided together that you really needed to have a service. You needed to offer something else. You couldn't just say no because of your being a Catholic. You had to say, well, actually, this is what you're going to do. So we set up that Christian health centre, and within that, so this is a picture of our little building. Within that, we set up a service, crisis pregnancy support, which Kushla manages. And, you want to talk a little bit about what you do?
Well, basically, it's a general practice-based service so that other GPs and health professionals in the region know that there are certain standards that are expected within the health profession, and therefore they have confidence to refer. We don't take over the full medical care of women, we just look after the crisis situation, and we look at just really walking alongside each person who comes to us and kind of trying to provide a window of time so that they know that you know, they might be 6 weeks pregnant, but in actual fact they're being told that they need to, you know, have the abortion by Thursday, and it's already Monday, and you say, look, you can slow down this process, and we do everything we can to put in place resources and help them sort of unpack all the things that are challenging them and causing such a crisis.
I mentioned to 1 or 2 people over tea or coffee that there were a lot of fears that I had as a GP entering into this field. I felt, A, that I was on my own. It was very difficult to know what we were going to do, Kushla and I. B, I thought, well, if a woman wants an abortion, then, and I'm going to try to encourage her to consider continuing the pregnancy, aren't we going to have a whole lot of disasters and babies that were unwanted and go to social services and all the, you know, neglect and abuse? And another fear I had was that actually people don't want this. This isn't what women want. But actually all of those fears turned out to be untrue. Once we'd opened St. Luke's Health Centre, within a short time I was seeing women again. And we saw 10 women in the first year requesting a termination of pregnancy. And to each one of those I offered this new service. You know, it's free. You could, I don't refer for termination of pregnancy, but if you're interested in just discussing the other alternatives, we do offer that free service, and would you like to? And to my surprise, 9 of those 10 women said yes. And to my other surprise, every one of those continued the pregnancy. And the next surprise to me, which was lovely, was that they did very well. You know, and a lot of these women had had bad experiences previously. Well, one in particular said that who had had postnatal depression each time, that she had never been as happy as this time in her life before, when she, just having the support of others.
Basically at the same time we went around and spoke at all the different churches around the region and gathered a huge volunteer group, a real community of people with different gifts and talents who wanted to donate their time. and we were inundated with help, and were able to make sure that every woman, we would start off by assessing what was her sort of natural support. If that was lacking, we would then build up a support network with that belief that every that it takes a village to raise a child, and that there can always be a community of love around her.
And it was very striking to us just how much goodwill there was in the community, because I felt isolated in my 15-minute appointment with this woman behind clinic doors. Thought it was just me and this woman, but in actual fact there's a whole community that want to be involved and want to help, and that was the striking thing. So, as Patricia said, within a short time we had 70 volunteers, people offering money, people offering their home, because they heard that something was happening and they knew where to put their effort. But the Lord wasn't finished with me yet, and we've got 2 more minutes. In 2005, I was prompted to stop prescribing and providing artificial birth control. Now, there's a whole lot of reasoning behind that, which I won't go into, but we can talk if you were interested later. But I felt, well, I need to be fair to my patients and write a letter to them and say, this is what I'm going to do. And so I wrote a letter to all of the women who I prescribed the pill for at that time. And one of them had a friend who worked for the press. And unfortunately, it became front page news all around New Zealand because there wasn't anything else in the news at the time. So that was the arid land, but I want to talk a little bit about the green shoots, because I'm seeing green shoots as well.
Absolutely.
And there's another scriptural quote which we found comforting. What God has planned for people who love him is more than eyes have seen or ears have heard. It has never even entered our minds. Having reached national notoriety, a person I knew previously in my medical career found me on a beach one day and said, look, Joseph, I want to support you. She was a doctor.
Public health physician.
Public health physician.
In the capital.
And evangelical Christian. But she said, look, I share your beliefs about contraception and about birth control. Why don't we get together and organise a conference? And so we did. We organised a conference in 2008 because at that time there was a lot of separation between different pro-life groups in New Zealand, and it had become a bit fragmented and weak as a voice in the community, and it wasn't quite the effectiveness that needed to be. There were exceptions.
We didn't want to form another organisation, we just wanted to provide a platform to bring all the groups together, so everybody started communicating, sharing their ideas, and then we broke into regions so that everyone within regions within New Zealand could network and feel equipped and inspired and encouraged by each other.
And so there was a lot of good fruit from these conferences. We had some fantastic speakers. Sister Miriam Duggan, who was a Franciscan missionary for Africa, who was quite instrumental together with her congregation in reducing the AIDS rate in Uganda. And also a Professor, Dr. David Reardon, who's written a lot about post-abortion syndrome. But the fruit in New Zealand has also been quite good to see, and I want to just go through some of the new initiatives in the pro-life world in New Zealand, which have really cropped up in the last few years. I won't go into any detail, but just to list them. So apart from our service in Nelson, there's also 2 initiatives for post-abortion healing, which are gaining momentum. And Rachel's vineyard retreats have occurred in other parts of the world, but they are now occurring in New Zealand more frequently for women with post-abortion healing. The New Zealand Health Practitioners Alliance, I thought I should mention, which is a group which is headed by Catherine Halligan, who many of you will know. And they won an important victory when, in 2010, they took the New Zealand Medical Council to the High Court and overturned their they were about to release a statement on doctors and beliefs, saying that if you're a doctor who held beliefs and you were opposed to abortion or opposed to contraception, then you had an obligation to refer to somebody who wasn't biased. And anyway, the New Zealand Medical Council was taken to court, and they were beaten by this New Zealand HPA group.
A victory.
It was a victory there. There's also Pro-Life New Zealand, which is a new student group, which has a presence on 7 different university campuses, and a membership of around 1,000, last I heard. We have a new initiative to teach sexuality in a family setting in accordance with what we see as being family, which also includes a little bit of work on natural family planning. It's called Loving for Life, and that's been trialled at the moment in several schools in Christchurch. We have a new organisation called Womb New Zealand, which is to help promote natural family planning teaching at a high standard in New Zealand.
So the practice we work from is a natural family planning, it's a general practice with natural family planning only, and works within a consistent ethic of life, even though we started out with that intention, but there was still further conversion and change for us to journey through.
So we looked around the different types of natural family planning, and as a GP I felt whatever we used had to be accurate, reliable, cheap, easy to teach, and had to apply to everyone. So I settled on the Billings ovulation method as being one that ticked those boxes, and have been very impressed with it and the scientific rigour behind it. There's also an organisation called Right to Life. I won't list them all, but I just want to put them up to just show you some encouragement. These are all new organisations within the last few years that are doing really good work, and I just want to show you our abortion rate, which was, when we started practice, quite high, around 18,000 a year, but it has been declining, which is encouraging to see. And looking at international comparisons, New Zealand is the red line at the top. So there's something happening in New Zealand to reduce the abortion rate, which isn't necessarily happening to the same extent in other parts of the world. And Chris has just reminded me to acknowledge an organisation which has been around for a long time in New Zealand and done a great job, which is the Family Life International, which is a Catholic pro-life organisation that's been holding the torch for many years and actually encouraged me in my change of heart on artificial birth control. So that's all needless to say.
So if anyone wants more information on any of the work, we've got, and I can email information on the general practice-based crisis pregnancy support service or any of the natural fertility.
And we've got some resource manuals. Did you
I can email that.
We've got time for questions. Would you like to take some?
Are you the only couple like this in Australia?
In New Zealand?
Sorry.
Sorry, a lot of people confuse us.
Over the bridge.
The only couple?
Well, you're such a team. I mean, you must be pretty exclusive. You're
well,
doing such great work. But
It's a great gift to have to be able to work together. It is, yeah.
We're in the process of trying to not franchise for profit, obviously, but to get more of these centres around New Zealand, but to let them grow organically. So the All for Life conferences that we ran or convened, they are helping us network. Recently we managed to have the Billings ovulation method of natural fertility. We managed to get the Royal College of New Zealand endorsement for all the continuing medical education points. So we could then, it was hosted on their website, so we were able to bring, to sort of take it out of just the Catholic or the Christian domain and bring it into, or invite from the mainstream in, because when people hear this wonderful truth, they're just amazed to hear about their fertility and the gift of their fertility.
It's interesting, at the time when I did stop prescribing contraception, I actually received a huge number of letters of support. Many of them were not from Catholics or Christians. They were just people that also saw the value in standing by your conscience, which was quite interesting.
Do you get any support or any financial assistance from your government to support you with your venture?
No.
No.
Have you ever applied for it?
We've just started at the very bottom of the ladder sort of thing and been successful with a very small grant, and in the 5-year plan that may change, but we're also in the process of setting up a resource centre for pregnant and maternal to sort of help with mums who are struggling after they've given birth, and we're wanting to name the centre the Mother Aubert House after Mother Suzanne Aubert, who's about to be made a New Zealand saint, the first New Zealand saint, we believe. But we're nicknaming it as Mars Place, the MA, because that's fits in well within the secular community as well. And there was a grant that for a resource centre that we applied to, which they didn't, because there weren't going to be full contraceptive services, that didn't go any further. So we don't want the tail wagging the dog. We want to put forward what we believe is a consistent ethic of life, and we believe that our Lord holds all the resources, and they'll come if, you know, that we don't go to the left or right of His holy will, which we have done, but now we're trying to discern that and believe that the resources will come.
But if you're the only couple doing this monstrous thing, you work 48 hours and 24, don't you?
Oh no, well we have a lot of support from other people, and that's been the impressive thing. The
A lot
community
of volunteers.
is there to help.
You have a lot of volunteers.
There's a lot of help from volunteers.
Yeah.
There are 7 volunteers who are health professionals who give their time to do the same role as Kushla. And that's been another thing that's really impressed us. But I mean, I guess people will donate their time to go and work in another country. But we've got a mission field in our own country in this area, and so people are prepared to donate their time.
And Joseph, could you just briefly touch on your interest in fertility, natural fertility?
Yes, well, once I stopped being involved in artificial birth control, I, as I said, re-looked at natural fertility, which I had been involved with earlier and we'd used and I'd learned about. At that time, the symptothermal method, which I found excellent. But at the time when I stopped prescribing, there were no symptothermal teachers in the area, and so I started again with a clean look at it. And I felt the Billings ovulation method had a lot of appeal. It's very simple and teachable. And I thought there was a very strong scientific rigour behind it. So the work of Professor Brown and Eric Oderblad and the Billings themselves in establishing the scientific basis for the method really appealed to me. And also the appeal was there for me to use this as an aid in gynecology, diagnosis and management. It's just like a whole new field of interest for me that I love, actually. It's very life-giving, and there's a marked difference between that and how I felt as a GP prescribing the pill. Somehow when I was prescribing the pill, you always felt on edge because not only was it against my conscience, but also you were having to think, they could get a DVT, they could get... And you have to explain all the possible adverse effects. And you also have to, you can't really ethically, if you're going to prescribe for one group, not prescribe for another group. There's a whole lot of complication. There was a whole lot of complication for me, not only morally but also medically. Whereas in teaching naturopathic planning is a whole different story, a different world, and very life-giving for me and the patient.
We also had a mentor who helped us organise sort of like a strategic or a project plan to look at how we could integrate or introduce the Billings ovulation method into primary care in our region. And from that basis, we started off getting some funding through a trust to be able to set up this pilot project and then get the person that we've employed in that role to go to a national role. And so bit by bit we're trying to get this networked throughout New Zealand as well.
So we now have a network of teachers who are linked by video conference.
And that pilot project is available if anyone is interested in sort of a strategic way of getting something out throughout a country.
Thank you both so very much.
Thank you.